During World War II, almost 6,000 aircraft met their demise over the Netherlands. Some have yet to be recovered. For 80 years, we've owed a debt to those missing airmen who paid for today's freedoms with their lives. But how can that debt ever be repaid?
Living in a free country, we should not take that for granted.
Following liberation, the Dutch government prioritized rebuilding. This was an enormously expensive task. For decades, relatives of lost air crews called for action so they could give their loved ones a proper burial.
Still very much a thing to have missing family members.
The excavation of lost World War II aircraft can cost up to €1 million per plane. Retrieving those aircraft can be both complex and challenging. Wreckage often contains undetonated bombs, and under the Geneva Convention, war graves must be left undisturbed. The Dutch study group Air War had long been pushing its government for a recovery program. They'd compiled a list of over 5,800 lost aircraft and submitted evidence there could be human remains in at least 50 planes. I recently spoke with the group's chairman, NATO Military Committee member Major General Ivo de Jong, at his home.
Hi,
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Come on in. Here's our beautiful register. It was done in 2008. And then, of course, the most important part of it is the list of all the aircraft that went down.
How did that list of 30 to 50 aircraft come about?
It all started when some of my members were stuck with their local council, how much it meant to them, how frustrated they were. At the same time, I could see the pain with the next of kin. And then I thought, well, this problem can't be that big. We are a very prosperous nation. Why can't we come up with a solution? How many of these 5,800 aircraft, how many are actually recoverable? And then we ended up with the famous number of about 30 aircraft wrecks which are recoverable.
Using their target list and a documentary highlighting the political tensions involved, the study group partnered with various Dutch lawmakers to generate support. Politician Stieneke van der Graaf put that motion forward in Parliament. I interviewed her at the iconic plenary hall in The Hague.
This is one of the most meaningful proposals I have tabled here in the Dutch Parliament. Living in a country where we have now more than 75 years of freedom, we sometimes tend to forget what happened before and that things can change. We are so thankful for those airmen who lost their lives here. It is a way to pay tribute to them and also to the countries who sent them to help us in very troubled times.
The Dutch government ultimately approved €15 million to recover 30 to 50 aircraft. 75 years after the liberation of Nazi-occupied Holland, the national program had finally found its wings. Of all aircraft shot down, the majority were recovered during or shortly after the war. This was the case for a British bomber on April 1, 1943, brought down in Hzor Forest by a German night fighter.
We're here in Hzor Forest and we walked about 1 hour through this forest to look for a monument of a Lancaster that crashed right here. And I think I can see it.
6 of the 7 crew members died in the crash. The 7th crew member was seriously wounded and died 1 day later. 7 conifer trees were planted around the memorial. 1 for each airman who died.
There's even fresh flowers here.
The fallen airmen are buried at Harderwijk Cemetery. Unfortunately, not all airmen who died in World War II had the chance for a proper burial. In 1943, another Lancaster bomber, ED-603, was on its way back from a bombing run over Germany when a German night fighter attacked. The aircraft and crew crashed into Lake IJssel. Within days, 4 bodies had washed up on the Frisian coast. The remaining 3 crew were lost with their plane somewhere in the IJsselmeer. That is, until 76 years later. In 2019, fishermen found a World War II engine in their net, finally revealing where the lost Lancaster lay.
Now here we're looking at the parts.
The National Recovery Program leapt into action. The missing Lancaster had been on its first flight. It was brand new. Among the first items recovered was one of the Lancaster's 8 tires, each the size of a front door. It's surprisingly intact after 80 years underwater. The Dutch military identifies and catalogues each recovered part.
Identification of the plane. And here's ED-603.
Right, okay.
So we know.
So you're constantly looking for
Yes,
that
yes.
serial number. Or not
Yes.
serial number, sorry, tail number.
Tail number, yeah.
Some of the more recognizable parts of ED-603.
It's a little bit damaged, but
A flare gun,
that's still intact.
oxygen bottles. Some of these bottles even perforated with bullet holes and shrapnel. Smaller parts of ED-603. All of this will turn into scrap metal. Civilians and individual collectors are not allowed to take anything. Neither is the Air Force staff, and neither, unfortunately, am I. So, what exactly does excavation involve? Major Hubert Schunken of the Dutch Air Force heads up the recovery team. He explains exactly what's involved in an excavation. It all starts with the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Team.
The EOD does the investigation of detecting the floor.
Large metal parts and explosives are removed. As many as 25,000 pieces of unexploded World War II ordnance are disposed of each year in the Netherlands.
This plane was, I think, 145 kilos of ammunition found.
The team carried out a controlled detonation. Cover damming is a technique that allows water to be drained for a dry excavation. This process was used for ED-603. A watertight wall was constructed, pumped dry. Then the overlying soil was removed.
There are investigators, people who are looking into the history of the plane.
Research by the study group Air War helps determine whether crew members are still missing.
And what do you do when you find those?
The identification people take the human remains with them.
Once examined and identified, the next of kin are informed. Major Schunken's team works to recover British, American and German aircraft, along with their missing crew. Once surviving relatives are notified, a dignified burial, often with full military honors, can be arranged. As memories fade, people struggle to find meaning in events from almost 80 years ago. But clearly, the national program is allowing the Netherlands to continue to give thanks, to commemorate. In 2020, near here in Markermeer Lake, a British short Stirling bomber was recovered. This pilot figure was formed from its metal. These powerful new memorials help ensure that the nation's gratitude to the missing airmen, now no longer lost, will live on.
We're here in Almere at the monument of a short Stirling that was recovered through the National Recovery Program. It's quite a dramatic monument because you can see the airmen sitting on top of what is the original engine of that short Stirling. This is just one of the hundreds of monuments that were erected to commemorate the lost aircraft and lost airmen in the Second World War.
The Dutch National Program has so far recovered more than 7 aircraft.
Keeping it going is important to me because I see the gratitude, especially from the next of kin, when there are results of the national program.
There's an end.
There's an end to it, you know. It gives closure. So that's, I think, the main issue. It's surprising how much impact it still has on family members. Even after 80 years.
I hope that the government decide to give more budget so we can continue to this work after that the budget is finished. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's a very honorable job. Because those people gave their lives for our freedom.
There is a connection between the relatives in our country right now, which is a bond that will stay. I think we will remember them forever here in the Netherlands.
An additional spin-off, which I had not thought about before, is that in the communities it also brings a lot, especially to schools. A lot of schools are visiting the recoveries when they take place, transposing these things into the current situation. When kids grow up with war as well at the border of Europe, it gives a good opportunity at schools to discuss war and peace as well.